Hi, everyone. Thank you all for being here this evening. We are just going to give folks
A todos,
just another
obrigada
minute.
por estarem aqui hoje. Nós vamos aguardar só mais um minuto.
I'm sorry, Rachel, do you want us to give the announcements now?
Sure, let's do it. We'll do it twice. So that sounds great.
Buenas noches, bienvenidos a todos. El día de hoy vamos a tener interpretación disponible en español y en portugués. En unos minutos en la parte baja de la pantalla van a ver un icono con la palabra interpretación. Le pueden dar clic ahí para seleccionar el lenguaje en el cual quieren escuchar la interpretación esta noche. Si están desde su celular o tablet, le pueden dar clic al botón de los 3 puntos para buscar más opciones y desde ahí les debe salir la interpretación. Muchas gracias.
Boa noite, obrigada por ter vindo comparecer a este encontro. Para ouvir em português, siga as instruções na sua tabela de controle da reunião ou webinar. Clique em Interpretation. Clique em português. Boa noite. Para ouvir em português, siga as instruções na sua tabela de controle da reunião ou webinar. Clique em Interpretação. Clique em português. Para ouvir apenas em português, clique e mude o seu original áudio. Silencie o áudio original. Meu nome é Rosane Rosa, estarei interpretando para vocês.
Right. So it is 6:02. We are going to get started. First, welcome everyone to tonight's meeting about the Gilman Square.
Bem-vindos todos ao encontro de hoje à noite.
To the Gilman Square City-Owned Properties Redevelopment meeting. We are going to start with some Zoom.
Can you please turn the channels on, please? Can you turn the channels on?
Yeah, let's do the instructions. Do we need to do the instructions one more time, or should we start the channels? I'll pull up the instructions once more. So everyone, we are hosting tonight's meeting in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Stephanie and Roseanne are here this evening as our interpreters. Do you want to introduce yourselves briefly first before we move into the channels?
Hey, Rachel, we've just turned on the channels.
Okay.
We can turn it off if you'd like, but they're currently interpreting.
Okay, excellent. So welcome everyone. If you are interested in listening in to Stephanie, who is leading us in Spanish this evening, and Roseanne in Portuguese, the interpretation button should be in the lower part of your screen to listen in. A little bit more on the technical front, just a little bit about how we're operating tonight. Tonight we are on Zoom, and we are hosting tonight's meeting in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. To be sure we can hear all of the questions and answers, please select your language in your language channel in the toolbar. All participants are joining tonight with muted microphones. We do ask that you rename yourself to your first and last name. That is mostly because we are going to be spending a good portion of tonight in breakout rooms, and it's helpful for fellow participants to know who they're speaking with. If you have any clarifying questions as we go through this presentation, you can type them into the chat, and that will reach our hosts, who will relay them to the speakers. And if you have any technical questions, you can send written comments to our host, Kate White, through the chat box, or email her at kwhite@somervillema.gov. So our agenda for this evening, we are going to spend about the first 45 minutes in this presentation format, and then we will shift into small group discussions for about 45 minutes as well. And then we'll come back all together towards the end for a summary of the discussions and a chance for some open questions and answers. Before we get there, I do want to spend a couple minutes introducing the team to you all. My name is Rachel Nadkarni. I am a senior planner in the Economic Development Division, and presenting with me tonight is Kyle Vangel from HR&A, the city's economic consultants. Roseanne and Stephanie are our interpreters this evening. And then we have several city staff who are helping with run the breakout rooms and coordinating the Zoom, all the folks that you see on this screen. That is really a subset, though, of the full team that are following this project and making this redevelopment of the city-owned properties in Gilman Square a reality. On the city side, we have staff working in the various divisions of the Office of Strategic Planning and Community Development. We also have colleagues in the infrastructure and asset management team, particularly engineering and capital projects, who are working with us on this project. The Arts Council is part of our team as well, as is the Office of Sustainability and Environment, and the ADA coordinator in the Office of Racial and Social Justice. Along with the city staff team, we have a civic advisory committee working with this project as well. The Gilman Square Civic Advisory Committee is newly formed. They had their first introductory conversation a few weeks ago, and this is really the first event that they're following with us. The CAC members have signed on to assist the city with community engagement and have done a great job already in advertising this meeting around the community. And they are going to be helping us strategize other ways to get in touch with folks and also to synthesize everything we hear from the community at tonight's meeting and in future events. Along with that team, we have some other teams that are working with us as well. The Gilman Square Neighborhood Association is a partner in everything happening in Gilman Square. We also have a studio at the Rhode Island School of Design, hosted by a local Somerville resident professor, Gavin Robb, his co-teacher, co-professor Nancy Nichols, and their students. And the students are here this evening, and they are helping. They'll be helping with note-taking during our breakout sessions. And then last, but certainly not least, are the local city councilors. Ben Ewan Campen and Jesse Klingen, the Ward 3 and Ward 4 councilors, are on the Civic Advisory Committee and are here listening tonight. And Councilor Ewan Campen, I was going to give you the mic if you wanted to say a few words.
Sure. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Rachel. And thank you to everyone who's here. I see 86 participants on this Zoom call. So I'm very excited to be here. My colleague and friend, Jesse Klingen, councilor from Ward 4, is also here. I really believe this is a situation where the city is lucky enough to own a large parcel of land, multiple parcels of land, right next to one of the new Green Line stations. And this is really an unusual and I believe a golden opportunity for us to really do community-led development and to work together to decide what we want to happen on these parcels. A priority of mine, obviously, is to make sure that we are building new affordable housing and mixed income housing. But I also know that there are a lot of really exciting priorities, and I think that we can make sure that we are doing all of those together. So I'm really thankful to all of the volunteers who have stepped up to be on the Civic Advisory Committee, to everyone on the Gilman Square Neighborhood Association, and everyone who just is coming to this meeting maybe for the first time. I'm really excited to be here to hear from all of you and to work with you all going forward. So thank you, Rachel, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Councilor. All right, let's jump into it. So tonight we're going to be speaking about the city-owned properties in Gilman Square. The city owns two pretty large properties right next to the future Green Line station that's about to come in. The city owns these two in lighter blue, so that's 350 Medford Street. What was called the Homans Building in its former iteration, and then what we often refer to as the Triangle site. That is this area in light blue down at the lower right-hand corner of your screen. That's that very steeply sloping lawn next to Pearl Street Park at the intersection of the Medford Street Bridge and Pearl Street. As you'll see as we go through sort of the history of how this site conversations have developed so far, the mobile station at number 360 Medford Street has often been talked about as a coordinated piece of this project. There's still a possibility that it might be included in this, and there are also possibilities where it might not be included. But we want to leave that here as part of the context of the discussion we're going to have tonight. There are, of course, lots of other activities happening in Gilman Square, and we wanted to highlight a few of them for you all. Even though we're not going to be focusing on them tonight, we want to just let you know what else is going on. So the first thing is that the city is engaged right now in a citywide stormwater plan. We know flooding is an issue in Gilman Square, and so if folks are interested in following that, there are upcoming meetings about that later this month. Depending on where you are, there's 2 different meetings you might be interested in attending. Second thing, of course, that is on everyone's radar is that the Green Line station is coming this year. The station is expected to open sometime spring, summer. We do not have a specific date right now, but we do know it will be in 2022. Another project that's ongoing right now is a project that the Arts Council is leading for what's that silver box at right next to the Medford Street Bridge. That is a building owned by the MBTA. It's a power station, part of the Green Line operations. Right now it is just silver on the outside, but the Arts Council is currently working to do something more exciting with the facade and really enliven that with some really great artwork. Many of you may have participated in a community meeting we had around Medford Street and Pearl Street streetscape design in the fall. That project is also ongoing. It is linked to the redevelopment of the city-owned parcels in that it will not, that design will not be completely finalized until after we know what is going on with the buildings. That said, we are continuing to move forward and bring that project, bring the engineering work along. And so the engineers are currently working through all of the comments that they received in November and are developing that project further. The other piece that's happening in this area is the Medford Street Bridge. Medford Street Bridge will open to traffic very soon. We just heard earlier today that it is likely to open next week to traffic. There is an ongoing, there's a sort of anticipated process to further plan what that bridge might look like in a future iteration, but we are not starting that process quite yet. But all that is to say, this is a very active area. There's a lot happening around these properties that is being taken into consideration. And you know, that is a lot to process. But for tonight, we are really focusing in on what's going to happen within those property lines. What happens in those spaces? So to get there, what I wanted to start with the presentation for everyone is really to dive into the history of these properties and bring it up to the present so that we're all starting with the same point in the conversation. There's been a lot of discussion around what could happen with these sites in the last few years. And I want to make sure we all have the same starting point, including some of the history of how the site has developed. So I'm going to take us pretty far back to the beginning of the 20th century when there was last an active passenger train station in Gilman Square. In the early 20th century, the Winter Hill Station, as it was called, was in the exact same spot that we are about to have a Green Line station. You could go both inbound and outbound from here. And we had this little station building, which what you're looking at right now is looking up the hill towards the Central Hill campus. And this is the 1895 school building in the background. This photo is looking in the other direction, looking out towards Medford Street. And you can see the properties that the city is working on a redevelopment for in this image. We have 350 Medford Street property in the foreground. At the time in 1910, that was a big open field. It does not appear that it was a very usable field in 1910. It was fenced off, there's some divots, and then there's some overhead wires running through it. The triangle site, that's again, that sloping lawn today next to Pearl Street Park, that had a building on it in 1910. It was a 3-story building in 1910 with retail on the ground floor and 2 floors of apartments above it. The rail line that made Gilman Square a really active place to, for passengers to get on and off closed in 1927. At that point, it was converted to a freight line. Freight line, not so useful for passengers, but was really great for warehouses. So in 1929, Reed Murdoch & Co. built this building that was in place up until 2018. It was a warehouse building. They used it for, Reed Murdoch and Co. produced foodstuffs, and this was both storage and production. The building was owned by several different companies over the course of the 20th century, most recently the Holman's company. That's why it's often referred to as the Holman's site or the Holman's building. The city purchased this building in 1999, including the land as well. So that's why it's now a city project to redevelop this. When the city bought it in 1999, the idea was that this building could be rehabbed and converted into new civic uses. In the years after that, doing deeper investigations, the building ultimately wasn't salvageable. And when it came time for Green Line construction, it was ultimately demolished to make way for Green Line construction, the Green Line construction, the yard that you see out there today. For those who are interested in the history and sort of some of the parameters, there's one thing we know from this building that will live on in this next permutation. And that is that there was this sculpture of a lion over the front door, and that sculpture has been saved. We also have a plaster cast of it, and the idea is that the lion head sculpture will go back into some form in the next building, next civic space, whatever it might be. The lion will come back to this location. The thinking really for the future of this site really starts in the sort of the 21st century thinking about what the future of this site might be, starts in 2014. And in the years sort of leading up to that. And that's with the Gilman Square Station Area Plan. The Station Area Plan was written to complement the planned Green Line station that we knew was coming in 2014, and laid out a vision for what that future would look like going forward. The Station Area Plan laid out these 9 action areas that you see on the right of the screen, with the key one being bringing back the square. Creating sort of a center point to Gilman Square was one of the key points. That's that image you see right on the cover. Then there was this idea that we'd fill in the gaps, some of the empty lots in the neighborhood, really invest in public life, the streetscape, creating great civic spaces, affordable housing, and then tackling some of the regulatory elements as well. I think an important quote from the 2014 plan is this one here on the left. And it says that a consensus solidified around a vision that Gilman Square's future should resemble its past. There should be a neighborhood square, a mix of services, employment, cultural opportunities, and transportation options. And so in 2014, that vision developed into a series of images about what the square might look like. And those images start with this plan here. So this is the plan for the Green Line station that existed in 2014. What you see here is, in terms of context, we see the Holman's building footprint as it was. We see the green on the triangle site that looks very similar today. And then we see the station structure. The red triangles represent the entrances to the station. And I think what's important here is that those station entrances really focused on the intersection of Medford Street and Pearl Street. And it became clear with this station that Medford Street and Pearl Street was going to be the center point of Gilman Square. And so the 2014 vision emphasized that. This is an image that showed what the vision was for the triangle site and some of the surrounding properties. The idea was that across from the station, there would be a new central green, really marking that this is the center point of Gilman Square. And the triangle site would be redeveloped into a new building, like it was in 1910. And that green, the green really anchors the center. For the remaining part of the site, the idea was that it would be redeveloped, as would the mobile station, into a series of smaller buildings. So here we see 350 Medford Street, with a 4-story building on it, a small park area, and then a series of buildings that sort of step up the hill on what is currently Mobile Station. That station and that vision, that station plan isn't what we're getting today. And so the vision plan may not be exactly the best fit anymore. And that's sort of the starting point for the conversations that have been happening since last year and that we're going to have going forward. How do we really adapt that vision to today? What you see on the screen now is the station plan that is being built. The station entrances are on the community path by the high school as it was in 2014, but there isn't a station entrance at Medford and Pearl anymore. The second entrance is now on School Street. And so that really changes this question, that sort of raises this question of, where is the center point going to be in the future? If Medford and Pearl was so clear before, now there's some uncertainty and we need to talk about that. The other thing is that now that the station entrance is on School Street, there isn't a route to the station that doesn't involve walking up a hill. You either have to walk up Medford Street or School Street to get to the station. And now that we're sort of at present, wanted to sort of highlight some of the other elements of the context that have changed a little bit, because they're now much more visible than they were even a year ago. The high school is now complete. This is 2021. The high school is now complete. It is much taller than and it's much closer to Gilman's, the core of Gilman Square than it was before. We see here also the start of the fields for the high school, right behind City Hall. And then these are our sites here, just for context. The other thing that happens with the Green Line construction that we can really see now in person is the height of that hill and also the cut down to the station level. The high school got taller, and then the station, there used to be a slope there, right? Sort of like that postcard back from the return of the 20th century. There was a slope there that was covered in trees. Without that, we're now seeing a much stronger wall between the upper part of the hill and the lower. And these are just new pieces of the context that we need to consider. And so along with all of this change, from 2014 to now, the city's planning team last year led a new study sort of looking at the physical reality. What are the physical elements of the site that might affect what goes forward in the future? So the zoning feasibility and massing study from last year really tackled 3 things. It explored site layouts that relate to the final design for the Green Line station. They consider which building types are now allowed to fit. We have new zoning rules in place, so it's looking at what those building forms would look like on the site. And then the third thing that they were doing was to investigate how buildings on the site could work with flood prevention infrastructure. Flooding has only gotten worse since 2014, and the strategies for that have been developing as well. So we were incorporating the new knowledge. I wanted to sort of point out that where we landed with this process last summer was not at consensus exactly, but there were a few clear priorities that emerged from those conversations. And where we are today is really an opportunity to check in and make sure that those priorities are what we should be taking forward into the next steps. So the first thing that the zoning feasibility and massing study really got into was building height. As part of this the study, they put out a survey asking folks for their opinions on building height. 36% of respondents preferred shorter buildings, 4 stories or less. 59% of survey respondents actually liked the idea of 6-story buildings. And half of that group said they were comfortable going above 6 stories. So we have, approximately 1/3 preferring the shorter buildings and approximately 1/3 saying above 6 stories is okay. One of the points where there did seem to be consensus, though, was that if buildings get taller, that height should be closer to the Green Line station and further away from Medford Street. And what I want to show you here on the slides are some of the graphics that were part of that study. So what you see here is one option, one layout, with looking just at 6-story buildings. So here we see the Triangle building at 6 stories and 350 Medford Street at 6 stories. In the context are all of the buildings that surround it. Pearl Street Park, sort of behind and to the right of the Triangle site. That's also a 6-story building. And what is sort of helpful to see here in this vision view is where this is looking from School Street. When you look from School Street, you can really see that height difference with the high school. The high school sitting up again on the hill, the cut down to the station, and much taller than it was before. It really reads as a very tall building relative to the 6 stories concept. In this version, a different iteration was a test of a 10-story building. This is how a 10-story building would relate, again, if you're looking at it from School Street. Thinking again about those priorities and what was being tested in the study last year, one thing that came out was a clear preference for a large civic space in the heart of Gilman Square. Where exactly, still to be determined, but this idea that there should be some large gathering space in the square. That goes along with this idea of flood prevention. One of the strategies that the engineering team has come up with is this idea that this site might be able to host a floodwater collection tank. So floodwaters from around the area would flow into a large tank, which should alleviate flooding on some of the surrounding streets. That tank can fit under a civic space that's built on 350 Medford Street, but it can't be built into the hill. Technical challenges. So one of the ideas that you'll see in these images is this idea of a new building on the Triangle site. And what's anticipated there is that the amount of space that's being used for open space would move from that site onto 350 Medford Street. No decisions have been made around that idea, but it's an idea that was tested in different iterations and seemed to have a lot of consensus before. The third topic that really seemed to resonate in the zoning feasibility study last year was this idea of expanding the mobility options through this, as part of this redevelopment project. The first one, I think, is the one that sort of always stands out to me, and that's this idea of really creating that no hill walk from the neighborhood to the Green Line station. And so the idea that we would create an elevator somewhere within the site and a walkway up to the community path and the station entrances. And so each of the images that was developed, or the layout options that were developed in this process, included that elevator somewhere on the site with a pathway. The other idea that really seemed to resonate was an idea that there should be a pathway from Richdale Ave through the site to connect Medford and Pearl more quickly with the Richdale Ave neighborhood. And so that pathway is shown in this image here and the elevator here. And this is another version. The pathway continues this time to an alley instead of the civic space, but the elevator shifts in this version to the other side. But these two ideas seem to really resonate with folks in 2021, and we want to just check in again and make sure if these are still on the priority list. This image is probably the most controversial that was drawn up as part of the zoning study, but it was to look at what would it look like if there was a high-rise building on this site. And some folks were definitely not in favor of the high-rise building, but others were open to the concept. And as we were talking about this last June, what really stood out was that there was an interest in understanding the trade-offs. What would a taller building in Gilman Square mean? And that I think also goes for the 10-story building as well. What does it mean if we're looking at a taller building in Gilman Square? What does that mean in terms of community benefits, particularly? So folks had a lot of good questions. Does that mean if we allowed a larger redevelopment in this location, does that mean that there would be an offset for the public contributions in terms of financing for all this infrastructure people are interested in seeing? Could one of these buildings finance and help pay for that elevator up to the station, the flood storage tank? Would accepting a taller building on this location mean it's easier to have more affordable housing or more affordable business spaces, et cetera? And so where we are today is to really dig into this trade-offs question. And that's why we're really starting with, we really want to build that priority list and understand what trade-offs are people interested in seeing for heights of different types or other priorities. So that brings us up to today. I'm going to turn things over to Kyle Vangel, our partner in this effort, to talk about the research and the work they've been doing to understand what the trade-offs might look like for us.
Thank you, Rachel. So first, I just wanted to introduce our firm and sort of talk about our past experience. So HRNA is a real estate and economic development consulting firm, and we work a lot with cities around Massachusetts and around the country to help them advance their planning goals. This slide is showing some of the projects we've worked on in the past, including a market analysis for the Brick Bottom neighborhood in Somerville. HRNA also served as the lead consultant for Boston's Imagine Boston 2030 comprehensive plan and supported the housing and economic development planning for the city of Cambridge's comprehensive plan, Envision Cambridge. And lastly, we also served as the sort of early business planners and strategists for projects including the Lawn on D in the South Boston waterfront and the High Line in New York City. We go to the next slide. So for this project, we are following a 4-step process that, as Rachel mentioned earlier, is really about us being able to help sort of understand and inform the development of a preferred development plan for the site that is based upon an understanding of economic feasibility and resolving trade-offs inherent in different potential public policy goals to make sure that the final sort of concept is ultimately meeting the city and the community's goals. So our first phase of work was to conduct market reconnaissance and really understand where the market is today, which is really important for this work because the market is moving so quickly, in terms of even comparing to where it was in 2021 or 2020 or pre-pandemic. It's really important to make sure that our economic models have the latest and greatest data available. As part of this, we've also conducted outreach and conversations with a dozen developers who are active in Somerville and in Greater Boston to really gauge their reactions to the site opportunities, their perception of constraints, and other considerations that they wanted to offer for the site. This is all about us, sort of building towards being able to create a financial feasibility model or a real estate pro forma that is capable of looking at different scenarios and understanding their economic feasibility and understanding, therefore how to reconcile trade-offs and, support this, this conversation going forward, understanding what the costs and benefits of different strategies may be, for instance, in terms of including more affordable housing, more affordable small business space, what that means in terms of, sort of other, sort of monetary resources that may be required, and how all of this can be reconciled for a feasible project. And then in the last phase, really, our role is to help advise on designing that a feasible sort of process for finding a development partner, and creating a plan that is balancing a variety of goals, policy goals, finance, and an appropriate process. So we're very excited to be embarking on this process with the city. If we go to the next slide. We wanted to share some of our initial findings from the market reconnaissance that we've done and the conversations with developers that we had. So first, we think it's good news to report that our expectation is that if the city were to move forward in recruiting a development partner for this site, there would likely be a strong response from the development community, just given the strength of the Somerville market and its appeal, and of course the proximity to the upcoming Green Line station. In talking with the development community, given the size of the site, sort of the dimensions that exist, its location, which is kind of surrounded by sort of lower in mid-density neighborhood fabric, the vast majority of the developers we spoke with really saw this site as primarily a residential opportunity with the potential for an active ground floor experience, which could include retail, community space, sort of any number of potential uses on the ground floor, but with really residential above that seen as likely what the market would want to do on the site. Developers also had the feedback, probably no surprise, that including the mobile site into the assemblage would provide greater opportunities, more flexibility in order to sort of lay out the site, which could in turn lead to the potential to include more community-oriented uses. And lastly, in talking with developers about what density they thought was appropriate, not just contextually, but also in terms of the market economics of delivering a building here, they really saw a mid-rise building, which i.e. on the order of 6 stories, as the most likely type of development that would occur. This is frequently called a stick-on podium product in real estate jargon, which really means typically 5 or 6 stories of wood frame construction over a 1 to 2 story concrete podium. Once you build higher than that, that is really as tall as you can go with wood frame construction typically. After you move beyond that, construction costs escalate significantly, and oftentimes you may have to build something even denser in order to make a feasible development project. So that's why developers we spoke with tended to see this mid-rise project as kind of the sweet spot for this site. But of course, that is sort of by no means definitive at this point, but really just an initial impression of the market, and we want to continue to work through this process and understand the community's feedback in terms of what the future opportunities hold for the site. Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, Kyle. All right. So as Kyle and his team are digging in to where the developers see the site, we really want to understand where all of you see the site and its future. Our first step going forward is to understand what the community priorities are. And that means starting with individual priorities, and that's really tonight's goal, is to record and collect as many individual priorities as we can. And then to start to make sense of them, are there points of consensus where everyone's agreeing? And where do we still need to dive in a little bit deeper with research? As we build that community priority list, one of the very first questions we need to answer is if the mobile site is important to meeting those priorities. If it is, the city would need to take steps to bring them into the conversation. The main one being looking at an urban renewal plan. An urban renewal plan allows the city to use eminent domain and take the property and bring it together. City does not take use of eminent domain very lightly. It's important to us that we go through a really robust community process and understand that we are doing so to meet community needs. And so that's a big part of why we are out tonight and why we will be doing as much as we can to hear from folks over the next several weeks. If we are, whether or not we are moving forward with the mobile or not, the step after that will be to find a qualified development partner. As Kyle was mentioning, we're going to be, what we're looking at with this is that we'll be working with the private sector to help realize a new building on this, new buildings and new civic spaces on these sites. And so the first step is to find developers that we are comfortable working with. So those qualifications are going to be key. And so we'll be asking at that stage, what's their, how experienced are they with community engagement and working with community priorities at the forefront? How transparent are they in terms of what they need to make these things work? So we'll be having, that's sort of step one, is to find a short list of developers that we're comfortable working with and making this project happen. From there, we will ask those few developers that make the cut to share their proposals. What would they do with the site if they won? From those, there will be a decision-making process around which developer to work with. And once we have a developer on board, they will take the project through design and permitting. There are many intermediate steps in all of this. And there will be community engagement throughout this process, all the way through to when they start construction. So there's a lot to go to move forward with, and we hope folks stay involved as much as they can. This is our timeline for the next few months. We are here at the beginning, all the way on the left of this community meeting to talk about redevelopment priorities. We're going to continue to have conversations around development priorities for the next several weeks. And we'll have an online survey that will go up tomorrow. We will be doing some smaller group activities, reaching out to others who may not have been able to make it tonight, and encouraging them to share their ideas as well. So alongside that, Kyle's team and our team will be doing further research on on the ideas that come out of this process. We're hoping to come back to everyone sometime in late May or June with a second meeting, reviewing the findings from the surveys, discussing prioritization of all the ideas that we've heard, and really diving into that question of if the mobile site is important to meeting the priorities we've heard. From there, in the summer, we're expecting to be able to move forward with either writing that urban renewal plan to bring the mobile site into the project, or moving ahead with searching for a development partner. As I mentioned, there's going to be opportunities to engage throughout this process. In the immediate future, we hope you'll share your thoughts with us this evening. We hope you'll follow up when you have another great idea at midnight tonight with our online survey. Maybe not midnight tonight, but midnight tomorrow. We'll hope you share this presentation and the survey that will be online with your friends and neighbors. The Civic Advisory Committee, they are going to be meeting every month. It's the fourth Thursday of the month from 5:30 to 7 p.m. These meetings are currently virtual, and there's going to be public comment taken at each meeting if folks would like to bring their ideas or comments or questions there. Also, please connect with city councilors, the Civic Advisory Committee members themselves. These are your neighbors. The Gilman Square Neighborhood Association, the leadership, that whole team, they are all neighbors as well. And then of course, city staff. The city's website, Summer Voice, here at the bottom, there's an opportunity to sign up where you can get newsletters from us, as well as that's where all of the material will be collected after this. So as we transition, I wanted to sort of outline what we need to hear from, what we're hoping to hear from you this evening. We are, as we mentioned, we are building that list of community priorities. So we want to know what you would include on this list. We've built this is sort of an intro list of things we've been hearing, and we want to sort of check in on these things, but please also add anything that comes to your mind. From that last year of dialogue around the zoning feasibility study, we have some priorities that we've heard around infrastructure, the elevator, stormwater tank, public space, and that pedestrian pathway to Ridgedale Ave. And then as we've been meeting the members of the Civic Advisory Committee, they've brought some of their ideas to this as well. They've talked about, places for teens to hang out when they're not at school, places to get something to eat, especially at lunchtime, grocery, a community center. The YMCA is looking for its next location for a larger facility. Perhaps this is a good location. We'd be curious to know your thoughts. Folks have mentioned, what if there's an opportunity to build a sledding hill here? Think big, it's okay. We encourage it. People just looking for spaces to hang with their friends. Some folks have mentioned, this does feel like a quiet neighborhood in the evenings. Can that, how do we maintain that? And then generally, stores on the ground floor with apartments above as sort of an idea. So we've organized this into these 5 categories: community infrastructure, community spaces, types of businesses, housing, and other outcomes. And so we're going to move, as we move into breakout rooms, we're hoping to hear your feedback on each of these categories. Which of these community infrastructure projects resonates with you? And is there a type of business you'd love to see or you'd really not like to see? As Kyle mentioned, offices and lab space really aren't priorities right now in the markets in the development world with the private sector. But we want to hear folks' thoughts, yes or no. If that were to shift, what would your opinion be on that? Same with housing. Are there particular features of housing, affordability? What are your priorities there? So thank you all for listening for some time. I know, Kate, I saw one question in the chat specific to this that I was going to answer before we move into the breakouts. So Christine Carlino asked if there's an opportunity to not use urban renewal process and engage in partnership with the current or future owner of the mobile site. And there might be options there. We have not had a chance to really dive into all the possibilities. We do know that there's, maybe there's interest. There may be interest to move forward on its own timeline. The other thing with an urban renewal plan is that it doesn't necessarily mean that the city will move forward with eminent domain. For those who've been following what's happening at 299 Broadway up on Winter Hill, there is an urban renewal plan in position there. But there's still a private development moving forward that is in line with the urban renewal plan. It just adds another layer of surety, perhaps. And then I don't see any other questions. Another question asked was could it be more than one developer? And that is a possibility as well. And I think that's part of this question about the mobile site is one of the things that was explored in the zoning study was what if there was a sort of changing to the layout of the lots, in which case you could assign, the mobile owner could develop with a change to the lot lines. An urban renewal style plan still facilitates that so that we can do a land swap between them more easily. And then there's another question in the chat that was, is the city also taking into account the visioning board on Summer Voice that has been up for 3 years now? This might be a good time to plug that as it is still active. Yes, there is a visioning board on the Summer Voice page, and that's where this survey will go as well. So any input we get on Summer Voice, it's all coming into the same place.
Rachel?
Yes, Counselor. Jump in.
Yeah, so I just want to say before we go any further, thank you for that presentation. Thank you for all the work that you and staff have been putting in to this process. I know it's been frustrating for the community because of like continuity, things like, staff turnovers and so on. But this is a process that the folks in Gilman Square have been pushing for now for quite a few years. And so it's good to see it get going. May not be necessarily as speedy as we'd all like, considering the train coming and so on. But I do want to say that, we're those efforts have not been in vain, and we'll continue to work together as a community to get the best out of everything. So I look forward to everybody having a say in this robust conversation. And I sorry I couldn't say anything earlier. I was in transit, but anyway, so I just want to say before we go further, thank you all, and look forward to working with you.
Thanks, Counselor. I think that is a good transition point. I think we have a few other questions and we can come back to those afterwards, but we do want to make sure we leave a lot of time for folks to get into discussion. So in a minute, you will be asked to join a breakout room where we will ask for you to share your priorities for those 5 categories: the infrastructure, community spaces, businesses, housing, and other outcomes. In the breakout rooms, we are going to be using Google Jamboard. This is an interactive online whiteboard, and your facilitator will share a link to your specific breakout room's Jamboard when you get there. We do ask that everyone just be respectful of everyone else in your comments and your inputs as we move into this session. So some instructions. Step 1, how you're going to get to the breakout rooms. If you've not done this before, you want to click on the breakout rooms. It's that icon that looks like 4 squares in the meeting controls at the bottom of the screen. You want to hover over the number of the room of your choice. You'll click join, and then it'll ask you to confirm by clicking join again. For those of you who will be joining us in Spanish or Portuguese, please select the room with the language of your choice. For those who are discussing in English, you can select any of the rooms. They were all exactly the same. And we will, if there is an imbalance in the numbers, we will ask a few folks to move from room to room, just so that we can make sure there's time for everyone to be able to say what they'd like. At any time during the breakout session, you can click leave room, not leave meeting, but leave room. And that will bring you back to the main session. Kyle and I will be in the main session, as well as Kate, and we can answer any technical questions or also any questions about the presentation during this time. And if you are joining us tonight on the phone, you probably will not see those same instructions at the bottom. So if you remain in the main session, we will assign you to a room.
Great, thank you, Rachel. So folks, we're going to open up the breakout rooms. Just like Rachel shared, you can select the ones. You should have a window in that button, or the window pop up in your screen. So again, just make sure to press the join of the room of your choice. Okay, Rachel, we have a lot of folks joining. I think we're just waiting for some folks to still join. If you have any trouble accessing the Zoom rooms, feel free to raise your hand or chat myself in the chat box. Regis, I see your hand raised. I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question.
Hi, I'm on the iPad app and I don't seem to have a control for breakout rooms here.
Okay, no worries. Would you like me to add you to a room?
Sure,
Okay, great.
thank you.
Sophie, I see your hand raised. I'm going to unmute you now, so you got to ask your question.
Hi, thanks. Could you do the exact same thing for me? There's no option. I'm clicking breakout rooms, but
Totally. I can send you to a room now.
thanks so much.
No worries. If anyone else needs any help, just let us know. We're happy to send you to a room.
I don't see I'm clicking on the breakout room and the breakout room pop up, but it doesn't seem to add me on to it.
I can help you, Rem. Would you like me to send you to a room?
Yes, please.
Okay. There you go. You should be heading to room 1 now. Thanks, folks. If you have any issues, again, feel free to send it in the chat or raise your hand. And just a reminder of those who have not joined a breakout session, let us know if you need help getting in, but we will be waiting till the breakout sessions return to resume the presentation.
And if you have a question or in a technical issue, please feel free to raise your hand or send a message in the chat. Kate, I'm going to jump over to room 6 just to double check that they're
Sounds good.
okay with the internet. My screen will stop sharing, it says. So I think
Okay.
that'll just be okay.
And just a reminder, feel free again to send a chat to me if you would like me to send you to a room. But we will be resuming the presentation after the breakout sessions have returned, which will be roughly in 45 minutes. Thank you all. We'll be bringing everyone back to the main session in just in just about 30 seconds. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We'll resume the presentation shortly.
Kate, I realize I sent you the PDF. Do you want me to share?
Sure. Welcome back, everyone. We'll resume the presentation shortly.
All right. I was in, I think, every single session, and there were so many ideas. This is so fantastic. I think it's going to be, I'm really glad we have all of our RISD students helping out, because they were able to catch all of them that came in at the same moment and move them around so we could read everything. And it was really great to see all these great thoughts. I think we might have everybody back at this point. So I'm going to ask each of the facilitators to give like a 1-minute report out of something really cool that they heard from their group. And then we'll talk about next steps and open it up to Q&A. So I think first up might be Tom. Do you want to go first?
I'd love to go first. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed in 60 seconds to distill all the great ideas that came out. I think just the quantity of ideas was amazing. People talked about lots of green flavors to this development, what it should look like, whether it's bioswales, whether it's energy efficient housing or geothermal powered or heated housing. A lot of discussion about community spaces and the desire to have something really active for commuters, for the neighborhood. A lot of small local businesses would be ideal, coffee shops, great civic space that would invite people to linger, and a lot of thoughts about public art, and maybe, a really interesting idea, I forget who came up with it, was to look at the wall, the 20-foot high wall that the train tracks are kind of creating, and could that be a graffiti wall running all the way through Gilman Square? So that was interesting. But again, a lot of art thoughts, especially with Matt Oyster Studios down the street and a public art installation happening at the TPPS station as well. Groceries, cafes, some thoughts about second-story commercial spaces to keep the area pretty vital during the day, and housing. The biggest, most popular thing was affordable housing, all kinds of housing in terms of unit sizes, everything from micro all the way up to family units. A lot of interesting support for that. And let's see, any other closing thoughts? Prioritize quality of space over profit. So there was a reference to the 5/2 building typology and how after about 5 years, those look kind of tired, and the desire and the hope that we can do a little bit better here on such a prominent site on a transit stop where everybody's going to be passing by. Yeah, I hope I did it justice, folks. A lot of great ideas. Thanks for participating.
Thanks. Nick Hughes, I think you're up next.
Yep. Yeah, similar situation. A lot of great ideas. I think outside of what Tom mentioned, ones that really stood out to me were ensuring an activated ground floor, parks, this kind of idea of dwell spaces. There's a need for teenagers and high school students to have an area to hang out that I think is currently underserved, and included in that, which got a lot of support, was a public restroom component. So really ensure that there is the option to spend several, hours there, actually hang out, rather than being just kind of a pass-through phase. So that was one of the constants that we saw throughout. Cafes, there was a lot of support for cafes. And then to Tom's point, truly mixed housing, mixed income housing, mixed size of units, accommodating solo renters as well as larger families. There was a lot of discussion on the different types of housing, whether rentals or condos as well. That was where we spent a lot of our time. And then a lot on sustainability measures, including flood prevention, heat calming measures. We spent a decent amount of time focusing on that as well. But to Tom's point, a lot on our Jamboard, and had a lot of great ideas in our breakout room.
Fantastic. I'm forgetting the order, but I think Ted is up.
Sorry, I was muted. We had a lot of great ideas as well. We had a lot of support for a funicular up the hill and connecting the neighborhood with the municipal services and the high school at the top of the hill. We also had there was a lot of need for green spaces, neighborhood level commercial spaces, whether it's coffee shops, co-working spaces, personal service businesses, but neighborhood scale. A lot of demand for affordable housing, family-sized housing particularly, and rental housing that's accessible to a wider array of people. There was a desire for possibly getting the YMCA to locate in the neighborhood and to just pay attention as the site's redeveloped to neighborhood issues like car traffic, encouraging vibrancy, but also being respectful to local families. If there are events or lively activity, fostering it during the weekends and preserving more quiet times during the week. That's about it for group 3.
Thanks, Ted. Charlotte.
I'm so sorry if my internet cuts out while I'm talking. It very well might. But despite my internet troubles, our group had lots of great ideas. Some that stood out to me included a winter garden and other ideas of how to make both this area have more green space, but also year-round green space or year-round community spaces that aren't just usable during the summer or just during the winter, but truly year-round. I also heard a lot about all ages programming and really connecting with the surrounding resources, including the high school, local colleges in the area like Berkeley, or the fact that there are musicians there and we can draw on that. And a creative idea that I hadn't heard before but really liked was the idea of a glass-walled escalator connecting this site to the MBTA tracks or to the MBTA station. There were just a lot of great ideas about really how to make this a community destination and work for the existing community, but also draw new people in.
And I think William is up next.
Yeah, there was a lot of great discussion in our group as well. A lot of the ideas that have been shared thus far. With regards to community infrastructure, there's a lot of concern about appropriate measures for flood mitigation and what might be the solution to that, possibly looking for alternatives beyond the flood prevention tank. Overall access and equitable access was a big theme throughout the different priority categories, whether it was access getting up and down the hill, whether it was making sure it was a space that was accessible to where all members of the community felt welcome. For community spaces, there was a lot of excitement around the idea of having an indoor swimming pool there. And just seeing if there's anything else that we haven't really touched on yet. There was definitely discussion about, what measures can be taken to support sound absorbing vegetation or just ways to kind of make sure that it's a vibrant community, but also respectful of the residents. So that's what I'll add.
Awesome. Thank you, William. So I just want to do a quick report out from the Spanish and Portuguese rooms. We did not have anyone join in either of those groups this evening. I think so. We don't have any comments from those, but we are going to continue outreach in multiple languages as we move forward, so we can hopefully catch other folks who prefer to speak in those language options. So I do, before we move to Q&A, I do just want to reiterate a last few notes about where we're going from here. We are going to tomorrow, you'll see a survey that goes out that will basically be the same exercise that you all just went through with us in the breakout groups. We will have the same survey questions about each of the 5 categories, looking for, you know, what folks are interested in seeing. I'm loving the creativity that everyone brought to this. And I think, you know, one of the things I'm seeing out of this is that RFQ, but we're gonna need some developers who are ready to hear creative ideas and incorporate some really interesting and engaging options. So keep the ideas flowing in the survey. We are going to also be working on some small group meetings, you know, targeting folks who may not have been able to make it tonight, high school students, working with the neighbors at Pearl Street Park, hopefully, and others. And the Civic Advisory Committee is going to be helping us strategize and reach out to bring more people in, either digitally or in person. Our aim is to be back in touch with you all in a meeting kind of like this in late May or June, to be determined if that will be in person or online again, or some combination. And we'll, at that meeting, we'll focus on, you know, reviewing all the findings from what we've been hearing and all this gathering of great ideas, and then talking about how to prioritize some of them, if there are some standouts particularly, and then looking at that question about the mobile site. And then again, hopefully in the summer, we'll be moving forward, you know, really towards bringing an implementation partner on board. And again, just as a last reminder, these are all the ways to stay in touch with us, and please continue to do so. These slides will be available tomorrow as well. And then I did just want to highlight, as a reminder, all the other things that are happening in the area. We did get some questions about these in the chat, and happy to answer those as we move into the next questions. The citywide stormwater plan has its own dedicated page on the Summer Voice website, and there are meetings coming up this month. So if you are, there's sort of one meeting that covers wards 1 and 4. That's the Gilman Square core side of the hill, and then Highland Ave and towards Union Square is a separate meeting. They are different watersheds because the water goes in 2 directions from Highland Ave. And so if you're interested in following either of those, I would definitely recommend it this month. Green Line, we will keep everyone posted as we hear more information about openings and activity. We did get a couple of questions about the Medford Street Bridge in the chat before. Just wanted to highlight that while we're on this slide. The Medford Street Bridge will reopen to traffic. That longer term idea of converting it into something else is still in the planning stage. It's very much at the beginning of being discussed. We have not engaged an engineer yet or a design team, but we are working towards that. The idea that's been out there, that's been discussed for a while, is, and why it's sort of in this hatched lines on the screen, is that the idea is that what if it became something more like the High Line in New York, some sort of connected, more connected in terms of pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, you know, having space for emergency vehicles, but maybe closed to general traffic. That conversation is still very much a TBD. And needs a lot more conversation before any decision is made. I think we have a few minutes still, and so we can open it up to Q&A. Kate, just remind me of where we are on the time. I'm not seeing a clock at the moment.
We have about 11 minutes till 8 o'clock.
Great, so we have a few minutes to do Q&A. There are 2 ways to join us at this point, and I'm going to hand the mic to Tom, who is going to sort of field questions to the various members of the team who are here this evening.
Hey folks, good to see you all again. If you have a question, use the raise hand function and I think Kate will find you and unmute you, or I will try to unmute you.
I got you, Tom.
Oh, awesome. And we'll do our best to answer them. No questions. Nobody's interested in any.
I was gonna say, just as a reminder, you can find your raise hand button either through your reactions button on your toolbar, which can be at the bottom or the top of your screen. And depending on your Zoom version, you might also find it through your participants window. If you're joining by phone this evening, you can press *9 to raise your hand.
Kate, I see James Nicoloro, who's waving his real hand, not the raised hand function. So if you could unmute him, please.
James, you should be unmuted now.
Go ahead,
I'm a little
James.
foggy. It's funny, as much as I follow is, where is the access to that platform? There's not going to be any access from Medford Street to the platform?
I will go back to that slide. One moment. Sorry, this is going to move fast. Actually, let me see if I can exit and come back in. Save everyone the scrolling. So this is the design of the station. What you see here is the red triangles are where you can actually walk into a station. So you can walk in from the middle of the School Street Bridge. If you go by there right now, you'll see the platform. It's already in place. The other entrance point is going to be from the community path. This aligns roughly to where the staircase is on the high school, on the City Hall side of the high school building. There's a big grand staircase, and that lines up pretty well with this entrance here. There's elevators and stairs from both directions, and then the platform in the middle.
Gotcha. So then the Medford Street thing that we're all doing and talking about is really independent of getting to that platform. Okay. So why is it keep bringing up that there's got to be some kind of path from Richdale to the mobile station? What's all that about? Where's that going to be? I mean, is it too much of a hardship to walk down the street a little bit and take a right on to Medford to get to that area? I thought that was an access to the platform. So it isn't. The people in Richdale still have to walk across the street and up a little bit and go down an elevator. So why the land grab for the mobile station if it really is an imperative to this T station?
Yeah, that's really the question that we are sort of still grappling with is, how important is the mobile station to meeting the priorities? And so there's a few different ways that might play out. One idea that's was brought up in the last year's study was this idea that Richdale Ave, sort of if we have our big community space right here in the middle, then allowing the folks there to come straight in might be nice. There's also slope questions of accessibility from the perspective of someone in a wheelchair. Is there a way to make it a better connection if we can cut through? There are also other priorities that might mean that the mobile site is valuable. So one of the things we're going to be investigating is, something like a large community center. Would we be able to fit it dimensionally without the mobile station?
And the last thing, I know I harp on this a lot because it's sort of, that is the reason why we're all talking. I think primarily we're trying to garner support for this move of maybe taking the mobile station. What does the owner think about it himself? I mean, he's owned the property for a long, long time. And I ask all of you on this meeting, like, if you own that building, how would you feel about it losing it to something that's not imperative? If that building was on the tracks and it was preventing the T, absolutely. But it's not. It's sort of like a thing that, yeah, we want to do for the greater good of people. But on the other hand, it is privately owned, and we're in a society where if you own something, it's yours. And, so have you spoken to Tony, and has he voiced an opinion one way or another? Maybe he wants to relinquish it. He's owned it long enough, and maybe he's happy to lose it, but I don't think so.
James, that's a great question. He's been trying to sell the property since before the pandemic, and he is trying to sell it now. So he's interested in whatever opportunities that might exist. Another thing I just want to point out is that right now the 2 access points are where they are, but that doesn't mean we couldn't create an additional access point that is closer to Medford Street on the other side of the track. So that's something that we've been thinking about for the last couple of years. How do we bring back the kind of accessibility that the station was supposed to have but was value engineered out of the project when we ran the risk of losing the entire Green Line project. So we're trying to just explore all different possibilities to.
No, and I get it, and that all options have to be explored. But on the other, you're saying, you know, Tony's trying to sell it, but on the other hand, nobody wants to buy a piece of property that could very well they could lose, you know, with all the planning that goes in and this and that, and then it gets taken from them. I mean, you know, there are tons of examples of that around the city right now. So that's why I'm saying, of course, he's not going to be able to sell it, because not with that over his head. But again, I've said it before and I'll say it right now. I think taking the property just because you want it, not need it, I don't think that's a way to go, in my opinion. But and again, I don't know.
Thanks, James. Yeah, that's one of many options. I'm going to move on to, I see Wes's hand up. I also see Seth's hand up. Can we unmute?
I think Seth had their hand up first. Do you want to go Seth and
that's
Wes?
fine.
Okay,
That'd be
great.
fine. Sure.
Hi there. Thanks for the presentation, everyone. Tom, thanks for facilitating the discussion earlier. Kate and Rachel, and I'm sorry if I'm missing other folks from the city. I guess I just wanted to say, you know, given the fact that we are in an immediate climate crisis and also in a housing crisis, and also just in a general mental health crisis, and knowing how important it is to build walkable cities where amenities are close to where people live, I'm wondering what the city staff's thoughts are on trying to be as aggressive as possible in limiting parking per square foot. So that way we can build other things that this community really desperately needs. We really need as many housing units as possible, because they're much more energy efficient having multiple units in one building rather than having one building on its own and exposed to the elements. So I don't need to go into all the rationale, which we all know very well, for why we need to limit parking, but I'm just curious as to what the city staff's perspective is on that. Thank you.
Sure. So I can start with basically Seth, that the zoning code is very much set up to discourage substantially large parking areas next to the train stations. I think as we get further into this, the how close to zero is a question that we'll be diving into deeper. As we've been going through this process, one of the challenges that this site has is the stormwater tank. The stormwater tank is going to take up that's going to take up a large area of the underground infrastructure, which is space that, might have otherwise been made sense for parking. So doing a substantially large parking area is going to be very challenging because of the tanks. The tank is so highly valued in this location.
Does that answer Seth's question, Seth?
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, I do have concerns too about the single tank as opposed to having a network of biobasins. But I guess I'm wondering though, in like regards to ratios, I know at Boynton Yards, that project they've been talking about how low they can go there. And myself and other community advocates were trying to push for 0.4 per 1,000 feet, per 1,000 square feet. I'm hoping that Gilman Square, if we're going to make it a real place and a real destination for people who live here and people who want to have fun here, I'm hoping that we could set an example as being perhaps the most progressive. And I'm just thinking about the excellent model in a lot of other cities across the pond, like in Paris or or in cities in the Netherlands, where they've shut down areas to cars entirely. And the economy has actually boomed in those places, and people's quality of life has improved because of the fact that they're able to walk and bike.
Seth, that's definitely possible on this site, and that's definitely something that we're taking a look at. Wes, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, but first I just actually want to comment on Paris or Amsterdam as models. They are completely unaffordable in the middle of the cities for people to live in. And it's what I hear is everybody talking about keeping Somerville as not a place of luxury. And Paris and Amsterdam are absolutely luxury, or they're ghettos. So the anti-car thing is a little much. My question is, how hard are we going to push to get an entrance onto the Medford Street side? Because for people who live anywhere on Pearl Street or anything like that, it's a real hike all the way around. So I think it seems to me really important to leave a space where, even if we don't build it now, that an entrance that goes to the south head house from Medford Street would be possible eventually. It just boggles my mind that that would not be there. It will be a frustration for generations if that doesn't get built.
Wes, you make an interesting point. It's handicap accessible the way it's set up right now. It doesn't mean it's comfortable to climb up the hill, even that stretch of hill. So it's definitely something that we have consistently studied and continue to study. We think that's an important part. But you're right, it's an open question of what the community thinks. We'd love to hear any comments people want to share. You can send them to us or onto Summer Voice. That goes for any kind of comments and thoughts you have beyond this meeting. Just doing a time check, it's 8 o'clock right now. I see 3 additional hands raised. Are people fine with getting these 3 questions answered and then wrapping up the meeting? Does that work for people? I think we had Christine Carlino was next in line, followed by Stephen, and then finally by Alicia Bird.
Sure, Tom, could we do one quick thing though? Could we take
sure.
all 3 questions together and then we'll answer all 3 of them just in case there's the same themes?
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Go ahead, Christine.
Hi, yeah. So I wasn't going to say this, but I just wanted to +1 Wes. I think if we don't build that connection from Medford Street, it's never going to happen. So I think that's a huge priority. But I also wanted my comment was really on the tank. We talk about it as if like this is a done deal and that it's been thoroughly vetted, but it has not been thoroughly vetted. Engineering team has not thoroughly looked into what it's going to take to do that. And there are huge consequences to having that size of a tank underneath the Holman site. The EPA has regulations about those getting pumped out. When you have combined storm and sewer water, that is a smelly, smelly process. And so to have that in the center of our square where people are supposed to hang out is not ideal in any way. And I also think that, we know we've done calculations on this, that it can be mitigated and reduced in size so that it can go under the street or in a different location by using green infrastructure and infiltration bump outs along the streets that add green space and add trees and add street safety and street calming. So I know we're talking about this like it's a done deal, but I really think more investigation needs to be had into that tank rather than just assuming it's the size that it is and that it needs to be done in that location.
We hear you loud and clear, Christine. Stephen, would you like to share something?
Yeah, I just would like to uplift the fact that we shouldn't be considering this tank as being a done deal at all. I think we need a larger systemic review of it. Our sewer system covers the entire region. Our pipes are connected, all the way out. Everything that we have goes out to Deer Island. It's a regional look, and we need to, really think about this regionally, not just this site. And I've not seen anything that says, that all the connections to all the other sort of, parts of the sewer system that we, so we really just need to see this as a systemic issue, not something that we're going to solve with a, basically in terms of rainfall, a tiny little tank that could really, delay development on this site for years to come. We need to have something that goes into the neighborhood as soon as possible.
Thanks, Stephen. And just a reminder, there are 2 meetings that are being held to talk about the sewer system as it relates to this neighborhood and on the other side of the continental divide that is Highland Ave. So please jump on the Summer Voice page so you can find out more information and participate in those meetings. Love to have you. Alicia, last comment of the night or last question of the night? Feel free. Oh, we haven't unmuted you yet. We're getting there. Sorry.
I am. Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Okay, so my question is actually, we were talking about that there's only the 2 entrances. However, doesn't the community path come at street level at Medford Street? You can't see it on the picture. That's why I couldn't tell for sure. But I'm pretty sure that at where the community path touches Medford Street, that people will be able to get on there and then just walk to the station entrance. So it's a little further than School Street, but it's not that much further. So the people at that part of Medford Street will be able to get on. Unless they're planning a fence there. I thought they weren't. And then I have a plea for the tank, and that's that my street floods so bad that the houses on the other side of the street from me sometimes have water all the way to the top of their basement.
Alicia, are you on Richdale
I'm on
or you're
Richdale.
Montrose? Gotcha.
I'm on Richdale. Richdale floods the worst because the water comes down School Street and floods Richdale. And then it continues down School Street and floods Medford Street.
Gravity is not kind to Richdale Ave.
No.
That's a fact.
And the lowest point on Richdale is in front of my house. And the water sometimes gets up my steps that are the steps into the house.
Gotcha. Thanks, Alicia. Definitely this tank situation and the storm mitigation solutions are going to be complicated, and those are things that we're studying carefully.
Yeah. So real quick, how do I make sure that I find out about the storm meetings? Not the storm meetings, but the sewer mitigation, whatever you want to call it, meetings.
Sure. I think the easiest thing to do right now, there will be public announcements, and you will, if you're on the city email list, you'll receive notification, I'm confident. But also you can go, I think now, and go onto the Summer Voice page. And that Summer Voice page, we have separate pages set up for this project. We also have one set up for the sewer project. And so that will list when there are new meetings.
Yeah, I get all the announcements. I'm all signed up.
Perfect. Rachel has just copied and pasted the Summer Voice page in the chat. So if anybody is online right now, jump right on it. You can find out when those meetings are taking place.
And thank you, Alicia, on your question about the connection to Medford Street from the community path. The community path does connect to Medford Street. One of the challenges, though, is that's still substantially uphill for a lot of folks. And we haven't quite solved the Americans with Disabilities Act accessibility either for Medford Street. So, the no-hill option, I think, is still what folks are looking for, it sounds like, as well. But yes, you are correct. So that does conclude us for this evening. I wanted to say thank you again to everyone who participated. This has been really fantastic to see all of the creativity of the ideas. I think it needs to be applauded from everyone, and the thoroughness with which you all have contributed tonight. And again, we will be, if in the interim, we will be at, I'm going to just jump right to the end. If you go to our Summer Voice page, you'll be able to find all of these materials, the copy of this recording, the slides, the survey, everything will be there in the next day or two. And thanks again, and have a great evening.